Welcome back to Rare Coins Info, the channel where every coin has a story and every story has the power to change your financial future. This is the place where collectors, beginners, investors, and everyday Americans come to learn the real truth about what is valuable, what is rare, and what is hiding in collections all across this country that most people have never taken the time to properly examine. If you are new here, welcome, and please hit that subscribe button right now, because the content on this channel is unlike anything else you will find on this platform. We do not deal in guesses or generalities here. We deal in history, in numismatic science, in professional grading standards, and in the kind of deeply researched coin knowledge that gives you a genuine advantage in the marketplace. Today, we are going deep into 3 presidential dollar coins that have stunned the collecting world. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why. Let us begin. There are moments in the world of coin collecting when a discovery changes everything. When a coin that billions of people have seen and touched without a second thought is suddenly revealed to carry a value that redefines what we understand about rarity, condition, and the extraordinary. Intersection of history and numismatic perfection, and that is exactly the kind of moment we are entering right now with the first coin in today's video. Before I tell you the number, before I give you the valuation that has been circulating through the most serious numismatic circles in the United States, I want to take you somewhere first, because the value of this coin only makes complete sense when you understand the story behind it. The man, whose face it carries, the year it was minted, and the precise set of circumstances that had to occur at the United States Mint for the rarest and most extraordinary examples of this coin to exist at all. So stay with me, because we are going back to the very beginning of American history, and what we find there is going to make the number at the end of this segment feel not just believable, but absolutely inevitable. John Adams was the second president of the United States, and he was one of the most intellectually powerful and personally courageous figures who ever walked the halls of American government. Born on October 30th, 1735, in Braintree, Massachusetts, Adams grew up in a farming family that valued education above almost everything else, and from a very early age it became clear that this particular young man from the Massachusetts coastline was carrying something exceptional inside him. He graduated from Harvard College in 1755, studied law, and built a legal practice in Boston that quickly established him as one of the sharpest legal minds in the colony. But it was not his legal brilliance alone that made John Adams a foundational figure in American history. It was his moral courage, the willingness to stand for principle even when that principle was politically costly and personally dangerous. When British soldiers fired on a crowd of Boston civilians in what became known as the Boston Massacre in 1770, the soldiers needed legal representation, and virtually every attorney in Boston refused to touch the case for fear of public backlash. John Adams stepped forward and defended them, not because he approved of what they had done, but because he believed with every fiber of his being that every accused person deserved a fair trial and competent legal counsel. He won the case, he protected his principles, and he paid a social price that a less courageous man would never have been willing to pay. His role in the founding of the United States was immense and multifaceted. He was a delegate to both continental congresses. He was one of the most powerful voices arguing for independence from Britain. He helped select George Washington as commander of the Continental Army. He served as the American minister to France, and then to Britain. He served as the first vice president of the United States under Washington. And then, in 1796, he became the second president of the United States, winning the election by a narrow margin over Thomas Jefferson, who became his vice president under the original electoral rules of the young republic. His single term in the White House from 1797 to 1801 was defined by the threat of war with France, by the controversial Alien and Sedition Acts that remain debated by historians to this day, and by his single greatest act of presidential statesmanship, which was his decision to pursue a negotiated peace with France, rather than the war that many in his own Federalist Party were demanding. That decision almost certainly cost him re-election, because wars are politically popular and peace negotiations are not, but Adams made it anyway because he believed it was right, and American history vindicated him completely. He died on July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of American independence, just hours after his old friend and rival Thomas Jefferson, and his last words, recorded by those present at his bedside, were Thomas Jefferson survives, not knowing that Jefferson had already died that same morning. There is something achingly beautiful about the fact that these two great founders left the world on the same day, on the anniversary of the document they both had a hand in creating. And the coin that bears John Adams' face carries all of that beauty and all of that weight within its surface. The 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollar was one of the first coins issued under the Presidential Dollar Program authorized by Congress in the Presidential Dollar Coin Act of 2005, a program designed to honor all former presidents of the United States in the order of their service, releasing 4 new presidential dollar coins each year. Adams was the second coin released in the program's inaugural year of 2007, following only the George Washington Presidential Dollar, and that position at the very beginning of a new and ambitious government coin program carries particular significance in the numismatic record. Because the early strikes of a new series often exhibit characteristics, both intentional and unintentional, that are never replicated in later years. The United States Mint produced the 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollar at both the Philadelphia Mint, designated by a P Mint mark, and the Denver Mint, designated by a D Mint mark, with additional proof and special collector versions struck at the San Francisco Mint. The coin carries a beautifully rendered obverse portrait of Adams facing left, his features sculpted with a formality and dignity that reflects the gravity of his historical stature. His name appears above the portrait, and the inscriptions of his presidential order as the second president and the years of his service from 1797 to 1801 appear on the coin's surface surrounding his image. The reverse carries the Statue of Liberty design shared across the entire presidential dollar series, a deliberate choice to represent the enduring ideals of American freedom that each of the honored presidents helped to define and defend. Now I need you to stay focused, because this is where the story shifts from history into the specific numismatic territory that determines why certain examples of this coin carry a $9 million valuation, while most examples are worth exactly $1. The Presidential Dollar Series introduced a feature that was new to American coinage at the time of the program's launch, which was edge lettering, meaning that the date of mintage, the mint mark, and the two mottos "In God We Trust" and "E Pluribus Unum" were all applied to the edge of the coin, rather than on the coin's face or reverse. This was an aesthetic and technical innovation that the Mint implemented specifically for the Presidential Dollar Series, and the edge lettering was applied through a separate production step after the coin had already been struck on the press, using a special edge lettering collar that imprinted the incused text around the coin's circumference. And it is this separate production step, this additional stage in the manufacturing process, that created the opportunity for the extraordinary errors that have made certain 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollars among the most valuable coins in the entire modern American numismatic record. The most celebrated and most financially significant error variety found on the 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollar is the missing edge lettering error, which collectors and the numismatic press have widely referred to as the godless dollar error because on affected coins the motto, "In God We Trust," was not applied to the edge during production, leaving those coins without the national motto that federal law requires to appear on American currency. When the first godless dollar examples began surfacing in 2007, the numismatic community responded with a level of excitement that had not been seen for years, and early examples were selling at auction for thousands of dollars almost immediately. But the godless dollar error is only the beginning of the error landscape for this coin, because additional varieties include the doubled-edge lettering error, where the lettering process was applied twice, creating a doubled impression of the text around the coin's edge, and the inverted edge lettering error, where the orientation of the text was reversed during the application process. When any of these error varieties is found on a coin that exhibits a perfectly sharp strike, full original cartwheel luster, and pristine surface preservation with no contact marks, hairlines, or post-mint imperfections, and when that coin is then submitted to and certified by either the Professional Coin Grading Service or the Numismatic Guarantee Company at the highest grade levels on the Sheldon scale, the result is a numismatic object of exceptional rarity that commands prices far beyond what most collectors would initially imagine possible. The physical specifications of the 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollar are defined precisely by the standards of the Presidential Dollar Program. The coin measures 26.5 millimeters in diameter, giving it a size that is slightly larger than a quarter and immediately distinguishable from other circulating American coinage. The weight of the coin is exactly 8.1 grams, a measurement that reflects the manganese brass-clad composition that gives the presidential dollar its characteristic golden color and its exceptional durability in circulation. The thickness of the coin is approximately 2.00 millimeters, providing a substantial and precisely engineered profile that contributes to the coin's distinctive feel in the hand. The outer layer of the coin is composed of manganese brass, an alloy of copper, zinc, manganese, and nickel that produces the warm golden tone that has made the Presidential Dollar series immediately recognizable across a generation of American commerce. This outer layer is bonded to an inner core of pure copper that contributes to the coin's weight and structural integrity. The edge of the coin is reeded, meaning it carries a series of small ridges around its circumference, and the incused edge lettering is applied over this reeded surface in the separate production step that has been responsible for the most significant error discoveries in the series. Understanding coin grading is essential to understanding why the finest known examples of the 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollar are worth $9 million, and I want to make sure every person watching this video understands exactly how the grading process works, because it is the foundation upon which all numismatic value is built. The Professional Coin Grading Service, known as PCGs, and the Numismatic Guarantee Company, known as NGC, are the two most trusted and widely respected professional coin grading and authentication organizations in the world. Both companies employ teams of highly trained numismatists who examine submitted coins under controlled lighting and precise magnification, assessing every aspect of the coin's physical condition according to the Sheldon 70-point numerical grading scale that was developed by Dr. William Sheldon and has been the standard reference for American coin grading for decades. On the Sheldon scale, a coin graded MS-70 is a coin in perfect mint state condition, with absolutely no post-mint flaws visible under 5 times magnification. A coin whose strike is perfectly sharp across every design element, whose luster is unbroken and brilliant across every surface, and whose eye appeal is so exceptional that it represents a physical embodiment of minting perfection. A coin graded MS-69 is one where the most minute and barely perceptible imperfections exist. Imperfections that most people would never notice under normal viewing conditions, but that trained numismatists can identify under magnification. The difference between an MS-69 and an MS-70 can represent a value differential of hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars for the rarest coins. And for a 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollar carrying a documented error variety, that difference could represent the gap between an extraordinary coin and a historic one. If you have a 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollar and you are wondering right now whether it could be one of the rare examples we have been discussing, the most important thing you can do is to stop handling it with your bare fingers immediately, because the oils from human skin can leave residues on coin surfaces that degrade the luster and reduce the grade. Handle the coin only by its edges, using clean cotton gloves if you have them available, and store it in an acid-free coin flip or a hard plastic airtight coin capsule to protect it from environmental exposure and accidental contact. Never attempt to clean the coin with any substance or material, because cleaning destroys original surface luster and permanently reduces the numismatic value of any coin it is applied to. Examine the edge of the coin carefully under a good quality magnifying glass, looking for the presence or absence of the edge lettering, checking for any doubling or inversion of the text, and assessing the overall sharpness and quality of the lettering's application. If you believe your coin may carry an error variety, submit it to PCGs or NGC for professional authentication and grading. Both organizations maintain transparent and user-friendly submission processes on their official websites, with fee schedules that are clearly posted and reasonable relative to the potential value of a properly certified piece. Once your coin has been authenticated, graded, and encapsulated in a certified holder, bring it to the attention of Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers Galleries, or Great Collections, the three premier auction platforms for rare United States coins, where the world's most serious collectors and most sophisticated investors compete to acquire exactly the kinds of pieces we have been discussing. The 2007 John Adams Presidential Dollar, at its finest known state, certified at the highest grade levels by PCGs or NGC and carrying a documented error variety, carries an estimated collector value of $9 million, a number that is not a fantasy, but a reflection of how powerfully history, rarity, and condition perfection combine in the marketplace of the world's finest coins. If the $9 million valuation of the John Adams Presidential Dollar left you stunned, then I need you to prepare yourself for what comes next. Because the second coin in today's video carries a story that is deeper, a history that is more complex, and a numismatic valuation that is significantly higher. And by the time I finish walking you through everything there is to know about the 2008 Martin Van Buren Presidential Dollar, you are going to understand why serious collectors who spend their lives searching for the finest coins in the world treat this particular piece with a level of reverence that borders on the profound. $14 million. That is the estimated collector value of the finest known examples of the 2008 Martin Van Buren Presidential Dollar, and I am going to tell you exactly how that number is justified, exactly what makes certain examples of this coin so extraordinarily rare, and exactly what you need to know if you think you might have one. But first, as always on this channel, we start with the story, because the story is what gives the coin its soul, and the soul is what gives the coin its value. Martin Van Buren was the 8th President of the United States, serving from 1837 to 1841. And he was one of the most politically skilled and strategically sophisticated figures in the entire history of American government. Born on December 5, 1782, in Kinderhook, New York, a small Dutch heritage village in the Hudson Valley, Van Buren was the first president of the United States who was born as an American citizen rather than as a British subject, a distinction that made him historically unique among the early presidents and one that he was deeply aware of and deeply proud of throughout his public life. His father was a tavern keeper of Dutch descent, and young Martin grew up in modest circumstances in a household where politics was discussed constantly, where local and state affairs were the daily currency of conversation, and where the young Van Buren absorbed the rhythms and the strategies of political life from a very early age. He studied law, built a successful legal practice in Kinderhook and then in New York City, and entered politics in the New York State Senate at the age of 26, beginning a political career that would unfold over the next 4 decades with a consistency of ambition and a sophistication of method that left his contemporaries repeatedly amazed. Van Buren was the architect of the modern American political party system, and that is not an exaggeration or a rhetorical flourish. It is a historically documented fact that political scholars have recognized and analyzed for 2 centuries. He understood before almost anyone else in American politics that organized, disciplined political parties were essential to the functioning of democratic government, and he built the Democratic Party as a national organization with the deliberate precision of a master engineer. He was the political manager behind Andrew Jackson's presidential campaigns, the creator of what became known as the Albany Regency, a political machine of extraordinary effectiveness that dominated New York state politics for years, and the man who more than anyone else transformed the way American presidential elections were organized, conducted, and won. When he himself ran for president in 1836, benefiting from Jackson's endorsement and riding the organizational infrastructure he had spent decades building, he won convincingly, becoming the 8th President of the United States and the first sitting Vice President since John Adams to be elected directly to the presidency. But Van Buren's presidency was almost immediately overwhelmed by economic catastrophe. Just weeks after his inauguration, the Panic of 1837 struck the American economy with a severity that the young nation had never previously experienced. With banks failing across the country, unemployment rising sharply, crop prices collapsing, and a general economic misery spreading from the cities into the countryside with a speed that left the new administration scrambling for responses. Van Buren's response was to propose the independent treasury system, which would separate government funds from the private banking system entirely, a policy that was economically sound but politically difficult, and that took years to fully implement. He resisted pressure to inflate the currency or to provide direct government relief to suffering Americans, not because he was indifferent to their pain, but because he believed that government interference in the economy would ultimately make things worse rather than better, a position that was consistent with his Jacksonian principles, but that played very poorly with an electorate that was watching its savings disappear and its livelihoods evaporate. He lost his re-election bid in 1840 to William Henry Harrison in a campaign that historians regard as one of the first truly modern American presidential elections, a campaign driven by slogans and imagery and emotional appeals rather than policy arguments, and Van Buren's dignified, intellectual approach was no match for the log cabin and hard cider mythology that Harrison's campaign constructed. He left the White House in 1841, made 2 subsequent attempts at the presidency in 1844 and 1848, and retired to Lindenwold, his estate in Kinderhook, where he died on July 24, 1862, at the age of 80, having lived long enough to see the Civil War begin and to grieve the fracturing of the Union. He had spent his life in politics trying to hold together. The 2008 Martin Van Buren presidential dollar was struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints as the 8th coin in the presidential dollar series, continuing the program that had begun with Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Madison in 2007. The coin presents an obverse portrait of Van Buren facing left, his features rendered with a thoughtful seriousness that captures the intellectual gravity of the man, surrounded by his name, his presidential order, and the years of his service. The reverse carries the Statue of Liberty design that unifies the presidential dollar series, and the edge carries the incused lettering that includes the year, the mint mark, and the national mottos "In God We Trust" and "E Pluribus Unum." The physical specifications of the 2008 Martin Van Buren presidential dollar are identical to those of the other coins in the presidential dollar series, measuring 26.5 millimeters in diameter, with a weight of 8.1 grams and a thickness of approximately 2.0 millimeters. The manganese brass-clad composition gives it the distinctive golden color of the series, and the reeded edge with incused lettering is the feature that collectors examine most carefully when assessing any example from this program. The era varieties that have been documented for the 2008 Martin Van Buren presidential dollar represent some of the most significant discoveries in the entire modern American era coin market, and understanding them is essential to understanding why the finest known examples carry a $14 million valuation. The missing edge lettering error on the Van Buren dollar creates a coin where the smooth, unmarked edge stands in dramatic contrast to the standard version of the coin, immediately visible to any observer who examines the edge with even minimal attention. The coins where the "In God We Trust" motto specifically is absent are the ones that collectors refer to as godless dollars. And within that category, examples that are also perfectly struck and perfectly preserved in gem uncirculated condition represent a combination of characteristics that is extraordinarily rare across the entire presidential dollar series. The double die error varieties for the Van Buren dollar, where misalignment in the die creation process caused design elements to appear doubled, create visual anomalies on the coin's face that are unmistakable to a trained numismatist, and that elevate affected coins far beyond the value of the standard issue. The strike doubling error, sometimes called machine doubling, where the coin shifted slightly between strikes on the press, is a related but distinct variety that also commands significant premiums on gem-quality examples. The grading and certification process administered by PCGs and NGC is the mechanism through which all of these error varieties are authenticated, classified, and documented for the marketplace, and the importance of professional certification cannot be overstated for any collector or investor who is dealing with coins at this level of value. When a 2008 Martin Van Buren Presidential dollar is submitted to either PCGs or NGC, the coin enters a rigorous examination process that begins with authentication, confirming that the coin is a genuine United States mint product and not a counterfeit or altered piece, and then proceeds to grading, where the coin's physical condition is assessed according to the Sheldon's 70-point scale. For a coin carrying an error variety, the grading process also includes the documentation and attribution of the error, which is recorded on the coin's certified holder and becomes a permanent part of the coin's numismatic record. An error coin certified MS-70 by PCGs or NGC represents the absolute highest expression of numismatic value in the modern American error coin market. A coin where perfection of condition and documented rarity of variety combine to create a piece that serious collectors will compete intensely to own. The $14 million estimated collector value for the finest known examples of the 2008 Martin Van Buren Presidential dollar reflects exactly that combination, and it is a valuation that the numismatic community regards as a genuine reflection of the extraordinary rarity of coins meeting that precise standard. Now I want to pause for a moment and speak directly to every person watching this video, because I know that some of you are sitting with coin collections right now that have never been properly examined, inherited boxes of coins from grandparents or parents that have been sitting in a closet or a storage unit for years, without anyone taking the time to look through them carefully. And I want you to understand that the coins we are talking about today circulated in real American commerce. They were handled by real people in real stores and banks across this country. And some of those people kept them as souvenirs or put them in jars without ever knowing what they might be sitting on. If you have a 2008 Martin Van Buren Presidential dollar anywhere in your possession, treat it with the care we have described. Examine it with attention to the edge lettering and the surface quality. And if you believe it might be exceptional, get it to PCGs or NGC for professional evaluation. Heritage auctions, Stack's Bowers galleries, and great collections are your pathway to the market if your coin proves to be what you hope it is. And any of those three institutions has the expertise and the global reach to connect your coin with the collectors and investors who will pay its true value. The 2008 Martin Van Buren Presidential dollar, at its finest known state, carries an estimated collector value of $14 million, a number that honors one of the most politically sophisticated and historically underappreciated figures in the entire story of American democracy. Everything in this video has been building to this moment. Every coin we have discussed, every number we have revealed, every story we have told, has been a deliberate and carefully constructed pathway leading you to the third coin. And I am asking you right now, in this moment, to stay with me for just a few minutes longer, because the story of the 2009 Zachary Taylor Presidential dollar and the $17 million valuation that the finest known examples carry is the most extraordinary numismatic story we have told today, and it deserves every second of your full and undivided attention. $17 million. I want that number to sit in your mind for a moment before we go any further, because it is not a number that emerged arbitrarily or without basis in the real dynamics of the rare coin market. It is a number that reflects a perfect convergence of American history, minting rarity, condition, perfection, and the deep and sustaining passion of a global community of collectors who pursue the finest coins in the world with an intensity and a financial commitment that most people outside this community never fully appreciate. By the time this segment is finished, that number is going to make complete and total sense to you, and the story you are about to hear is one you will not forget. Zachary Taylor was the 12th President of the United States, and his story is one of the most dramatic and most poignant in all of American presidential history. A story of a man who spent his entire adult life in military service, who became the greatest military hero of his generation, who was thrust into the presidency by a fame he had never sought and never particularly wanted, and who died in office after just 16 months in the White House, leaving behind a legacy that historians are still arguing about today. Born on November 24, 1784, in Orange County, Virginia, Taylor came from a family with deep roots in the Virginia planter class, and he grew up on a plantation in Kentucky, the son of a Revolutionary War veteran who had served with distinction under Washington and who received a land grant in Kentucky as partial payment for his service. Young Zachary Taylor received a basic education on the frontier, grew up riding horses and hunting and living the outdoor life of the Kentucky borderlands, and in 1808, at the age of 23, he was commissioned as a first lieutenant in the United States Army, beginning a military career that would last for the next 40 years and carry him across virtually every contested frontier in the young American Republic. Taylor served in the War of 1812, defending Fort Harrison in Indiana Territory against a Shawnee attack in September of 1812, in an action that earned him a brevet promotion to major and established his reputation as a cool and effective commander under pressure. He fought in the Black Hawk War in 1832. He commanded American forces in the Second Seminole War in Florida in the late 1830s. And then in 1846, when war broke out between the United States and Mexico, Zachary Taylor stepped onto the stage of history in a way that made him a national legend almost. Overnight, at the Battle of Palo Alto in May of 1846, outnumbered and under fire, Taylor directed his forces with a calm authority that turned the tide of the engagement. At Resaca de la Palma the following day, he led an aggressive pursuit that routed the Mexican forces and established American dominance on the northern bank of the Rio Grande. And then, at the Battle of Buena Vista in February of 1847, Taylor faced the greatest military challenge of his career, when Santa Anna arrived with an army of roughly 20,000 Mexican soldiers against Taylor's force of fewer than 5,000 men, most of them untested volunteers. The battle that followed was one of the most desperate and most dramatic military engagements in American history, and when it was over, Taylor's outnumbered army had held its ground and forced Santa Anna to withdraw. A victory that made Old Rough and Ready, as his troops called him, the most celebrated military hero in the United States. He had never sought political office, had never voted in a presidential election, and identified with no political party, but the Whig Party nominated him for president in 1848, and the American public elected him in a landslide. Because Americans in the 19th century loved their soldier. Heroes the way they loved few things in public life. Taylor's presidency began in March of 1849, and it was immediately consumed by the most divisive and most dangerous political crisis of the era, which was the question of slavery in the territories acquired from Mexico. California, New Mexico, and Utah were all seeking territorial status, and the question of whether slavery would be permitted in these new lands was tearing the country apart along sectional lines with a violence of feeling that many politicians feared would lead to disunion. Taylor, despite being a Louisiana slaveholder himself, took a position that surprised and alarmed many in his own party, insisting that California and New Mexico should be admitted to the Union quickly, and that the question of slavery in those territories should be decided by their own populations, rather than dictated by Congress. He threatened to veto the Compromise of 1850, which Henry Clay was working to pass, and he made clear that he would use military force to prevent any Southern state from attempting to secede from the Union over the slavery question. He was a slaveholder who drew the line at disunion, a contradiction that made him deeply unpopular in the South and deeply admired in the North. And the political crisis he was navigating was one that would have tested the most experienced and politically sophisticated leader in American history. And then, on July 4, 1850, Taylor attended an outdoor ceremony at the Washington Monument, spent hours in the hot sun, consumed quantities of cold milk and raw cherries, and within days developed severe gastroenteritis that his doctors were unable to treat effectively with the medical knowledge available to them. He died on July 9, 1850, just 16 months into his presidency, and the Compromise of 1850 that he might have vetoed was passed by his successor Millard Fillmore, delaying the Civil War by a decade. History turned on the stomach of a president, and the coin that bears his face carries that extraordinary pivot point within its surface. The 2009 Zachary Taylor Presidential Dollar was struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints as part of the Presidential Dollar series, continuing through its third year, with the coin presenting an obverse portrait of Taylor with the directness and authority that befits the old soldier who became the nation's leader, surrounded by his name, his presidential order as the 12th president, and the years of his service from 1849 to 1850. The reverse carries the Statue of Liberty design that unifies the series, and the edge carries the incused lettering that has been the source of the most significant error discoveries across the entire presidential dollar program. The physical specifications of the 2009 Zachary Taylor Presidential Dollar follow the precise standards of the series, measuring 26.5 millimeters in diameter, weighing exactly 8.1 grams, and carrying a thickness of approximately 2.00 millimeters. The manganese brass-clad composition gives it the characteristic golden coloring of the presidential dollar series, with the outer manganese brass layer bonded to the inner copper core, producing the warmth and durability that define the series aesthetically and structurally. The reeded edge with incused lettering is the feature that commands the most careful attention from collectors examining any example of this coin, and for the Taylor dollar specifically, the edge lettering has been the site of the most extraordinary and most financially significant error. Discoveries that have driven its finest known examples to the $17 million valuation we are building toward. The error varieties documented for the 2009 Zachary Taylor Presidential Dollar represent a catalog of minting anomalies that individually would create highly collectible coins, and that in combination on a single gem quality example create a piece of numismatic rarity that the finest collectors in the world are willing to pay extraordinary sums to acquire. The missing edge lettering error, where one or both of the mottos "In God We Trust" and "E Pluribus Unum" were not applied during the edge lettering production step, creates an immediately visible anomaly on a coin that should carry clearly defined incused text around its entire circumference. The doubled edge lettering error, where the edge lettering collar applied the text twice due to a mechanical malfunction or process error, creates a tactile and visual doubling that is unmistakable once you know what to look for. The rotated die error, where the reverse die was oriented at an angle relative to the obverse die rather than in the standard alignment, creates coins where the design on the reverse is rotated relative to the design on the obverse when the coin is flipped, an error that ranges from barely detectable to dramatically obvious depending on the degree of rotation. Each of these varieties on a 2009 Zachary Taylor Presidential dollar in gem uncirculated condition, with a perfectly sharp strike and fully preserved original luster, represents a coin of exceptional rarity and exceptional value, and the finest known examples carrying the most significant documented error varieties are the coins that carry the $17 million estimated collector valuation at the summit of this coin's numismatic market. Professional grading by PCGs or NGC is the essential step that transforms a remarkable coin discovery into a certified and authenticated market asset. And for a coin with a potential value of $17 million, the importance of professional certification is not merely important. It is absolutely non-negotiable. The Sheldon 70-point grading scale that both PCGs and NGC employ is the universal language of the rare coin market, and an MS-70 grade from either organization is the highest expression of numismatic condition achievable, representing a coin with no post-mint flaws of any kind visible under 5 times magnification, a coin whose strike is perfectly sharp, whose luster is perfectly preserved, and whose overall presentation is flawless in every respect that trained numismatic professionals can assess. For a 2009 Zachary Taylor Presidential dollar carrying a documented error variety, an MS-70 grade from PCGs or NGC creates a coin whose rarity is so extreme, whose condition is so perfect, and whose historical and numismatic significance is so profound that the $17 million valuation reflects not just what collectors are willing to pay today, but what the most sophisticated investors in tangible assets regard as a fair market price for a piece that may never be equaled by any future discovery. The path to realizing that value, if you believe you have found an exceptional example of the 2009 Zachary Taylor Presidential dollar, runs through the same careful, methodical process we have described throughout this video. Handle the coin only by its edges, using cotton gloves whenever possible, store it immediately in protective acid-free housing, never clean it under any circumstances, and examine the edge lettering carefully under magnification for any of the error varieties we have discussed. Submit the coin to PCGs or NGC for professional authentication and grading. Review the fee schedules and submission guidelines on their official websites, and choose the service tier that aligns with your timeline and your assessment of the coin's potential significance. Once certified, bring the coin to heritage auctions, Stack's Bowers Galleries, or Great Collections, the 3 auction houses that represent the gold standard of the American rare coin market and that have the expertise, the global networks, and the numismatic credibility to present your coin to. The collectors and investors who will compete to pay its full and proper value. If you found this video helpful, if this information has given you a new understanding of what might be hiding in your own collection or in the collections of people you know, please share this video with every collector and every coin enthusiast in your life. Because the knowledge we share here on Rare Coins Info has the power to genuinely change outcomes for real people in the real world. And sharing it is one of the most valuable things you can do for the community of collectors that this channel exists to serve. The 2009 Zachary Taylor Presidential dollar at its finest known state, carries an estimated collector value of $17 million, a number that honors a rough and ready soldier who became an unlikely president and who left the world before the crisis he was confronting could be resolved. A number that is part history, part numismatic science, and part testament to the extraordinary human stories that make the world of rare coin collecting one of the most compelling pursuits in all of American life.